The red and blue lights hit my living room wall like a warning flare, and a patrol car rolled up to my driveway like I'd done something criminal. The officer stepped out calm as could be and said, "Sir, we got a call that you're trespassing on HOA property." I just stared at him because I was standing on my own porch in front of the non-HOA home I bought on purpose to never deal with this garbage again. A year earlier, I'd sold my old place after an HOA turned my life into a spreadsheet of fines and petty threats. Wrong trash can angle, wrong shade of mulch, unauthorized wind chime. It never ended. So when I started house hunting again, I had exactly one rule: no HOA, no community standards, no board meetings, no compliance. My realtor said, "Frank, this one's perfect. No HOA, quiet cul-de-sac. You'll love it." I signed. I moved in. I exhaled for the first time in years. And then, day 2, I met Linda Hart. She appeared like she'd been waiting for me, SUV parked half a block away, sunglasses on, clipboard in hand, like she was there to inspect a crime scene. She walked up my driveway like she owned it, smiled like she was doing me a favor, and said, "Hi, I'm Linda, president of the Cedar Ridge Estates Homeowners Association." I actually laughed because it sounded like a bad joke. "I'm not in your HOA," I said, still holding a moving box like a shield. Linda tilted her head and tapped her clipboard. "That's what you believe." I told her this house was listed as non-HOA. I bought it because it's non-HOA. She pointed down at the concrete under our feet like it was a map only she could read. "This driveway is part of our common area access, easement, community use." I felt my stomach drop because I knew that tone. That tone is what you hear right before someone tries to rewrite reality in front of you. I kept it simple. "Show me paperwork." Linda smiled wider. "Oh, you'll see it soon enough." Then she leaned in like she wanted it to sting and said, "Until then, you should understand you're trespassing." The word hit me like ice water. "Trespassing," I repeated, "on my own property." Linda's pen hovered over her clipboard like she was about to write me a ticket herself. "Homeowners Association boundaries are very clear, Mr. Dawson." I said, "You don't get to decide where my property starts and ends." And she actually said out loud, "Board members are exempt from certain restrictions." I stared at her. "So you can walk wherever you want, but I can't." She gave me this little shrug. Rules are rules. That night I didn't sleep much. Not because I thought she was right, because she wasn't, but because I could already feel the familiar pressure coming back. The same slow, sticky mess of harassment paperwork and people acting like they have authority just because they printed it on letterhead. The next morning I'm making coffee and I see her SUV again, parked across the street. Engine running, Linda inside watching my house like it's entertainment. 10 minutes, 20, 30. I finally walked out because I'm not the kind of guy who can ignore someone camping outside my front door. I knocked on her window and said, "What are you doing?" She rolled it down 2 inches, just enough to be rude, and said, "Observing." I said, "You're on my street staring at my house." Linda's smile didn't move. "I'm documenting a situation." I leaned closer. "You want to document this, get off my property and stop harassing me." She tapped her clipboard again. "Not harassment if it's enforcement." "Enforcement of what?" I snapped. "I'm not in your HOA." She took off her sunglasses, slow dramatic like she was about to deliver a verdict. "We'll see." Then she drove away like she'd won something. That afternoon I found a letter under my doormat. No stamp, no envelope, just a printed notice like it had been dropped off by someone who wanted to feel powerful. It said I was an unauthorized occupant and demanded I cease usage of my driveway, walkway, and adjacent lawn access. I read it twice, and then I read it a third time because I couldn't believe someone had the audacity to tell me not to use my own front yard. I called the non-emergency line, explained that a woman was threatening me with fake HOA enforcement, and asked what I was supposed to do when someone is basically trying to claim my property with paper. The dispatcher was polite and useless. A deputy came by, listened, glanced at the letter, and gave me the phrase I hate most in the English language. Sounds like a civil matter. Civil matter. That's what people say when they don't want the headache. I asked, "So she can stand outside my house, leave threats, claim my driveway, and that's just nothing?" The deputy said, "If she comes onto your property, call us." I wanted to say she already did, but I swallowed it because arguing with the only person in uniform who showed up doesn't help. After that, it got worse fast. A guy in a polo shirt I'd never seen before walked along my fence line taking pictures. Another one photographed my mailbox like it was evidence. And Linda's SUV reappeared every morning, just sitting there, the quiet kind of intimidation that makes you feel like your home isn't yours anymore. By day 5, I was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with age. Not tired, drained. There's a special kind of fatigue that comes from being forced to defend your normal life over and over to people who don't deserve an explanation. I remember standing in my kitchen that night, staring at the sink, thinking about my old place. Thinking about how I moved here to escape this exact thing. And for a minute I had the ugliest thought, maybe I should just sell. Not because I was wrong, because I was tired of fighting people who treat conflict like a hobby. I even opened my laptop and searched homes for sale agent near me, and I hated myself for doing it. Then my phone buzzed. It was my neighbor Ethan Cole, the only guy on the street who'd waved like a normal human being when I moved in. He said, "Frank, you got a minute?" Ethan walked over, looked around like he didn't want Linda's SUV to magically appear, and lowered his voice. "That woman's been pulling this stuff for years." I blinked. "With who?" "With anyone she thinks she can push," he said. She tried to tell the Johnsons their backyard was community overflow, tried to slap fines on a house 2 streets over that wasn't even in Cedar Ridge. I stared at him. How does she get away with it? Ethan shrugged. Most people cave. They don't want the drama. They just pay or they move. Something in me snapped into place right then. Not rage, not panic. Clarity. This wasn't confusion. This was a strategy. So I did what I should have done on day 1. I stopped talking and I started building a file. I printed the listing that said no HOA. I pulled my closing documents. I went online and found the county parcel map, the recorded plat, the boundary lines, the stuff that doesn't care about Linda's clipboard. The next morning, I drove to the county records office and asked a very simple question. "Is my address in Cedar Ridge Estates Homeowners Association?" The clerk didn't even hesitate. "No," I asked. "Is there any recorded easement that gives an HOA authority over my driveway?" He clicked around, leaned in and said, "Not that I can see." I felt this wave of relief, and then anger right behind it, because that meant Linda wasn't mistaken. She was lying. I called an attorney that afternoon. Megan Park Real Estate disputes the kind of person who speaks fluent paperwork. I explained everything, and she didn't sound surprised at all. She said, "Frank, stop engaging. Start documenting. Cameras. Keep every letter. If she comes onto your property, call law enforcement immediately." "And if she sends people?" I asked. Same Megan said, "They don't have authority, and if they pretend they do, that's a problem for them." So I installed 2 cameras that night. One facing the driveway, one covering the porch. Then I waited. Linda didn't make me wait long. 2 days later, late afternoon, I heard aggressive knocking, the kind that says, "I expect you to be afraid." I checked the camera feed on my phone. Linda was on my porch, clipboard in hand, and she had 2 men with her in matching polos, arms crossed like they were bouncers at a nightclub. I opened the door just enough to speak, chain still on, because I'm not dumb. Linda smiled like she had been rehearsing. "Frank, this is your final enforcement notice." I said, "You're not enforcing anything here." She lifted a stapled packet of paper and waved it in the air. "We have documentation. We have board authority. You've been non-compliant." I nodded slowly. "You're on camera." Her smile twitched. "That's fine." I said, "Great. Then you'll love this part. Step off my porch, Linda, right now." She leaned toward the gap in the door. "You can't block us from community access." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just said, "You are trespassing. Leave or I'm calling the sheriff." Linda actually laughed. "Go ahead." So I did. I called. I gave my address. I said the words clearly. "A woman and 2 men are on my property claiming HOA authority. They refuse to leave." And then I shut the door and waited with my phone recording, because if you've ever dealt with people like Linda, you learn one thing: today's lies become tomorrow's misunderstanding. When the sheriff's vehicle pulled up, Linda's posture changed immediately. Suddenly, she wasn't relaxed anymore. Suddenly, she wasn't the boss of the universe. The deputy walked up, asked what was going on, and Linda launched into her script. "This home falls within our homeowners association jurisdiction," she said, like she was reading off a training manual. "He is obstructing an easement." The deputy looked at her, then looked at me, then looked at the 2 guys in polos. "Do you have recorded documents?" he asked. Linda held up her packet. "Right here." The deputy didn't even reach for it. "Ma'am, recorded documents are filed with the county." Linda's mouth tightened. "We have board records. The deputy nodded once like he'd heard that line 1,000 times. Then he spoke into his radio and asked dispatch to verify the parcel. Linda kept smiling, but it was a thinner smile now, one you wear when you're trying not to panic. I stood there on my porch, hands at my sides, letting the process do the talking. The radio crackled. The deputy listened, and his face didn't change at all when he said, "This address is not under Cedar Ridge Estates, HOA jurisdiction." Linda blinked hard. "That can't be right," she snapped a little too fast. The deputy turned to her. "It is right." Then he pointed at my porch like it was the simplest thing in the world. "You are on private property. He has told you to leave. Leave now." Linda's voice went sharp. "This is ridiculous. The deputy cut her off. "If you return and continue this behavior, you can be cited for trespassing and harassment." The two polo guys suddenly found the ground very interesting. Linda looked at me like she wanted to burn a hole through my skull, like this was my fault for existing in a house she couldn't control. And for the first time since I moved in, I felt the power shift. Not because I yelled, not because I won some dramatic argument, because I stayed calm, kept records, and forced reality into the conversation. Linda gathered her papers with stiff, angry movements, like the clipboard was the only thing holding her together. She hissed, "This isn't over." The deputy looked at her and said, "Yes, ma'am, it is if you leave." Linda turned, marched down my steps, and walked back to her SUV like someone who'd just been told no for the first time in her life. She drove away without looking back. I stood there on my porch in the sudden quiet, not celebrating, just breathing like a man who got his front door back. Because the truth is, peace isn't something people like Linda give you. Peace is something you defend with receipts. Lesson: keep your paperwork. Keep your footage and never let a bully's clipboard rewrite your property line.